Hey guys, welcome back to another Cereal at Midnight video. This is a members Q&A. From time to time, I do Q&As with the members. Members submit questions. To be a channel member, you can sign up either through YouTube or through Patreon. And I decided to do something a little bit different with this one, so the members get it first, and then I'm going to share it with everybody because I want people to know that these videos are happening, right? This is a thing that's happening. I also think it will be very interesting to share my answers about some of these things. So without further ado, Jim E kicks us off. You've been given the opportunity to ask a single question to a trifecta of 60s music greats: Bob Dylan, Mick Jagger, and Paul McCartney. Oh boy. It can be the same question for all three, or you can choose individual questions, but you only get one with each. What do you ask? What is the flight velocity of a sparrow? So Bob Dylan, did the motorcycle crash actually happen? Which I don't think it did. That's my suspicion, is the fabled motorcycle crash never actually happened. I think coming off of that 66 tour and everything that was going on with Dylan and the hate of Judas going electric, I think he had to get out of the public spotlight. And did the motorcycle crash happen? That's the question. Paul McCartney, I would love to know if he still partakes in recreational substances, because he was the last to be really on board with that scene, but I think that he's the one that he's one of the two survivors now, right? Him and Ringo. And I have heard that he still partakes, and I would be interested to know if that's true. And if he does, I don't really see evidence for it in his music, Think about, look at what Brian Wilson did. Like, I'm specifically avoiding specific talk. I'm avoiding naming things, substances, because I want to keep this video from being demonetized or anything like that. But what these guys did in the 1960s just changed the face of music, and that hasn't happened in the last 60 years through them. So that's, do you still smoke, Paul? And for Mick Jagger, I would say, if you could, hey Mick, you and the Stones, the surviving Stones, are now the oldest, and have been, I guess, for a long time, the oldest surviving touring rock band ever. What would you do differently? Would you live your life differently? Would you have done less substances? There's a twist on the Paul question. Would you have done less? There's obviously that infamous bit of concert footage where they show him sniffing something off the blade of a switchblade before he goes out on stage. Would you have done anything differently? At the same time, he always took really good care of himself, because I know some concert footage or getting ready for a tour, and he was younger than I am now, and he was getting up he had a chair, he would just put a chair down and just step up on the chair, step off, up on the chair, step off, just doing these intense cardio activities. Impressive stuff. So thank you, Jim. Those are my answers to that question. Matt R asks, I don't necessarily want to know how the sausage is made, so please just blink once if you've been in touch with the Filmcast about being a guest on their podcast. No, I have not. I've dropped your name a couple of times as a suggestion, most recently to see if they would be interested in what I have to imagine will be a thoughtful, dissenting opinion on Horizon, should they choose to review it. The thing about YouTube is that it allows us, all of us, these long-form conversations where I can say whatever I want to say about Horizon. Anybody else can say what they want to say about a movie. And the need to debate or have a conversation to try to win somebody over is... I think it's important to hear dissenting opinions because we live in an echo chamber. But I also think there's no point in me going on anybody else's podcast to debate a particular topic, because you notice one of the consequences of all the whatever we're dealing with right now, the political, social, whatever, the media has really ruined us. Technology created 24-hour news cycles, and that has just ruined us. And so we don't necessarily have interesting disagreements anymore. We just hate anybody that doesn't agree with us, and we don't want to hear them, and we dig in our heels even deeper on what we already feel. So, I try to have, when I do interviews or when I have other people on my channel, it's usually to delve deep into something, or to get a perspective on, tell me about you. So I would love to go on someone's podcast to talk about my film journey, to talk about how I feel about things, but specifically to have a dissenting opinion about something, I have no interest in that. I probably wouldn't say yes, to be honest with you. Carson K, favorite piece of media that you have recently picked up? It's probably going to be, it's this vintage Hanna-Barbera book. I say vintage. How old does something have to be vintage? There's this Hanna-Barbera book that was published in the late 90s, kind of at the peak of that Cartoon Network resurgence, when Hanna-Barbera was like, we were getting Space Ghost Coast to Coast and Harvey Birdman Attorney at Law and all these things. Cartoons were cooler than they've been in a long, long time. And there was this book chronicling the history of Hanna-Barbera, and it is just gorgeous. And I didn't have the book, and it's long out of print, and it goes for a little bit of cash. And I found it at a good price, and I love that book. Salteran asks, what are your thoughts on certain properties beginning to slip into public domain, i.e. Winnie the Pooh? Do you like the idea of these properties being reimagined, perhaps in different genres? Is Winnie the Pooh, like Winnie the Pooh's now a horror movie? We've got the Steamboat Willie Mickey Mouse horror movie coming up. I have zero interest in a horror Winnie the Pooh movie. And I say this as somebody who has been sent Winnie the Pooh horror movies to talk about and publicize for. I have zero interest in that. I love Winnie the Pooh. Winnie the Pooh is actually, you know, the thing about Pooh, there's the soundbite. The thing about Winnie the Pooh is that it is a statement on childhood and the loss of innocence, really that last moment of innocence, because all of the characters in the 100 Acre Wood represent different facets of personality. Eeyore is the grump, Pooh is just wonder, Rabbit is sort of anxiety and worry, and Owl is like, they all represent, they don't have overlapping qualities, they all represent, Piglet is nervous, right? They represent unique facets of the human personality, the human condition. And the way one of those Pooh stories ends with Christopher Robin being like, Pooh, I've got to go. And it's like heartbreaking, like, I'm growing up now and I have to leave you behind. But we're supposed to leave it behind. So, okay, it goes into the public domain, and then it's, well, now we can make a horror movie with that. Zero interest. That's not interesting to me in the least. It's like subverting something that's warm and magical and actually means something really beautiful. So that's not for me. At the same time, nothing should be around making money forever. And Winnie the Pooh needs to go into the public domain, and Mickey needs to go into the public domain, and Superman and Batman and King Kong and all these things, the music of the Beatles, right? All this stuff needs to eventually go into the public domain so that it can no longer be exploited for profit by very, very wealthy estates. That's what it comes down to, is like at some point you have to let it go. At some point, Sherlock Holmes has to be everybody. He has to belong to everybody. I think the thinking behind it is like, well, if you have made money off of it, and your children have made money off of it, and your grandchildren have made money off of it, that's enough. Unfortunately, that means it's going to get watered down and turned to crap too, but that's the way it needs to be. That's the way it has to be, in my opinion. Shelby B, do you have any go-to snacks when watching a movie? I had thought about this when I saw this question. I mean, I really don't. It's funny. I will occasionally nibble during a movie or at a movie, but I heard someone say one time, I don't go to the movies to eat. And that's kind of where I'm at. Like, I go to the movies to watch a movie. Somebody said to me the other day, like, how I can't afford to go to the movies. It's $50. By the time I've bought a ticket and popcorn and a soda, I'm like, you could just buy a movie ticket and just go enjoy the movie. It doesn't have to be a meal, right? So I don't know. I do enjoy dark chocolate Raisinets. Those are kind of hard to find, but I do enjoy those. I mean, I'm just kind of a chocolate guy in general. I also like Snickers bars and things like that, but I don't associate movies with munching, if that makes any sense. Olav, is there any reason why you don't get review copies from Warner Archive? I think you are the biggest YouTube channel that talks about classic American movies on physical. Thank you, Olav. That's a very nice thing to say. So I used to get review copies from Warner Archive, and I know a lot of the people that used to work at Warner Archive. One of the consequences of the huge metaphorical bloodbath from a few years ago, when Warner Brothers, they're on their third CEO in 5 years, I think. And one of the consequences for that is that thousands of people have been let go. Warner Brothers outsources all of their PR to a third-party firm. And the people that were handling, the units that were handling Warner Archive have now been outsourced as well. So those are made by a company called Allied Vaughn. Warner Archive is manufactured on demand by a company called Allied Vaughn. It's the same people that make Alpha Video releases. And for whatever reason, since those changes have been made, Allied Vaughn simply will not give me the time of day. I've talked to them. I know the person at Allied Vaughn. I've emailed that person. And we got as far as an email conversation, and then it just stopped. And I don't know why. And any attempt to reignite that conversation has gone nowhere. Alderic says, as someone interested in pop culture, are you a collector of retro video games? So yes, I am, and I have been, but it became a problem, and I realized I was just collecting them not as a speculator, but as like a hoarder of the artifact, and I just can't do that where I'm at right now. I have so much stuff taking up so much space in my house. I have an Atari 2600, an original Atari 2600 with like the Vader grill, right? I have extensive games for that. I have an original Nintendo Entertainment System. I have a Super Nintendo. I have Sega Genesis, and I have cartridges for all of these systems. I have a GameCube. I never had a Nintendo 64. I've got multiple PlayStation 1s, multiple PlayStation 2s. I've got a PlayStation 3, PlayStation 4. So you can see I've got 2 original Xboxes. There's no room for all this stuff, right? And I'm not pulling out these systems and playing old games. In the age of emulators and all the technology that we have to make some of these things far more available than they ever were, I'm just not. I am holding on to some of the games like the X-Men Legends games, which don't seem to be coming back anytime soon. The Marvel Ultimate Alliance games, that Justice League. What was the Justice League? It was like the Justice League version of the X-Men Legends game. Those isometric style over the head action games. I love those games, and they just vanished, you know? That's the thing about licensed games, is when those licenses expire, the games pretty much disappear with them over time. And unless you have a cartridge or a disc, you're kind of out of luck. So I'm keeping a lot of that stuff, but whatever I can get rid of, I'm starting to sell. David R. How do you balance the love and inherent joy of watching a truly great movie with the, at times, pressure of keeping up with all the available media and releases? So that's a great question, and the answer is I don't do a great job of it. I'm having to let certain things go. Like if I buy one copy if I have a 4K, I need to let the Blu-ray go. If I have the Blu-ray, I need to let the DVD go. I don't have room for all of this stuff, and then balancing all the double dips and like, well, this has a new scan. You have to let that go, or I have found I have to let that go. I should also mention, like, all the stuff you see me talking about here on the channel, I don't keep all of that. Those fund the views they're the service, right? Those allow the service that I can cover things. Here's everything that came out from Kino Lorber. Here's everything that came out from Arrow. That doesn't mean I'm holding on to it. That doesn't mean that I'm hoarding all of these releases. And if I give a ton of stuff away, guys. I have given away thousands of movies to my library, to people that I wanted to have them, to friends, to family members. You simply can't manage everything that's coming out. There's just no way to do it. So you have to start making some cuts. And I know people go, you'll take my media out of my cold, dead hands. The more you have, the less it means. Crusader 53. There seems to be an interest growing in the older Westerns with a recent increase in the number of Blu-ray 4K releases. Do you expect this trend to continue and maybe expand to the lesser known but still good movies? I think that is the way that it has to be. Horror has been physical media has been driven largely by horror and by genre entertainment because those discs sell themselves. Hey, guess what, guys? We're getting another version of a Dario Argento movie. It's going to be the third version of the 4K, but it's got a new remaster, whatever. It's the thing I was just talking about. There's constantly these new releases of things. There's only so many movies, and so I think what we're seeing as a consequence of that is like Westerns are back on the table. Now it helps that shows like Longmire and like Yellowstone, we're in kind of a renaissance for Westerns. And because there's so much of it, a lot of it kind of falls by the wayside, and it's not all good. We don't have the monoculture that we used to. Now we have so many silos, but there are a lot of good Western films and TV shows that are being made that have really connected. Justified is a Western. And that leads people, you know what, I've ignored the elephant in the room, which is Red Dead Redemption. Red Dead Redemption 2. these have made Western fans out of millions of people who would never watch an episode of Gunsmoke or never watch High Noon or even the Outlaw Josie Wales or something like that. That's off the table for them. That's a whole different audience. That doorway has been opened by video games. So I do think we're seeing more of that. And, Roy Rogers, Under Western Stars, just got a Blu-ray release from Film Masters. And now that's amazing, because we're seeing restoration for things that have never been restored properly before. And I would like to think that I had something to do with some of the growing interest in Westerns, because as these people play Red Dead Redemption 2, when I reviewed Horizon, an American Saga, that video got over 10,000 views in a pretty short amount of time, which for my channel is pretty good. And so many people were like, I was prepared for this movie by Red Dead Redemption 2. That's what got me interested in Westerns. So I know that that is a gateway. And so I think that being able to see that gateway, and then me being able to say, well, I love Westerns too, here's some of my favorites on this platform, that has connected with people. So I'd like to think, I've made many, many, many videos about Westerns here on my channel. And I'm not 75 years old. And I'm not saying, they don't make them like they used to. Boy, in the good old days, a white hat was a good guy and a black hat. That's not the conversation. In fact, I don't even think that's right. When a review starts with, they don't make them like this anymore, I bail. Because I'm like, okay, you're not interested in any perspective. This is a rose-colored glasses situation for you. And that's not valid criticism. So I try to do something other than that, and I think that I've been able to really turn people onto Westerns. I also think that because this is a lead into the next question, Tarantino has made several Westerns, and I think people have connected with those that would never have watched a Western. This is our last question. Oh, there's two more, actually. Jason P. says, I've noticed that Tarantino is not someone you mention these days. What do you think his lasting legacy is? Do you consider him to be a lover of film preservation and also a warrior against the franchise machine? Have you been to the New Beverly? Where does he rank among the greats? Martin Scorsese, etc. I like Quentin Tarantino. When Reservoir Dogs came out on DVD, and Pulp Fiction came out on DVD, I would listen to his commentaries or the special features on his discs and take notes. He's talking about film stocks and he's talking about the way shots are composed, and that was very valuable to me. But here's the other side of it. This is what's challenging, is that he was positioning himself by choice. He did this himself, positioning himself as the bad boy of the new Hollywood, the 90s new Hollywood. And he was the rock star. And he would stand up at screenings and be like, F this. And like, he loved the attention. He was a frustrated actor. He wanted to be an actor. And he loves the spotlight. Well, now, all these years later, he's not the young Hollywood anymore. He represents, in some level, the establishment that he was rebelling against all those years ago. And I think the idea of I'm going to make, 10 movies and I'm out, I think that's very problematic, because artists don't just stop creating. I'm like, how can you do that? How can you stop making film if you love film? At the same time, he has a deep, deep knowledge of things. What's interesting is that because he had that connection to the video store that he had when he was younger, he had access to so many movies that a lot of us didn't have. He had an education, an on-the-job education. By working in that video store, now we can all have that education. Now if we want to see Pray for the Wildcats, it's on Blu-ray, it's restored. And so it's been leveled in some ways. And that doesn't diminish his contributions. I still really connect. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is one of my favorite movies. I love that movie. I think it's fantastic. I think it's his best movie. But at the same time, I would always, when I was younger, I would see something in a movie and I'd be like, what a great line. What a great piece of music, thinking it was his. And then years later, I would discover, oh my goodness, that's from this Kung Fu movie, or that line's from Sonny Chiba, or whatever. And I realized how much he's standing on the shoulders of giants that I never knew. The more you become versed in film history, the more movies you watch, the more you realize he's been borrowing from movies his entire career. And we didn't always know he was borrowing. A lot of us thought he was creating that stuff. That's sort of problematic. At the same time, I like to think that if we met each other, we'd have a good conversation, that we'd be cordial to each other. I think he's mellowed a lot. I talked to somebody that he punched in the face. That's always in the back of my mind. Like, if he doesn't like you, he'll just attack you. Interesting sidebar to that. Somebody told me, I know tangentially people in the biz, right? And somebody was like, I was having a conversation about you, Heath, with somebody outside the New Beverly. And I was like, man, what a crazy Hollywood story. And then I'm like, was Tarantino like peeking through the blinds, being like, don't talk about him here? Because I wonder if he's seen my stuff, right? I'm like, I made a video about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I've talked about him several times. I've reviewed his book here on the channel. I like him. I am challenged by some of the stuff he does. But you know what? At the end of the day, he's a very driven creator. He has a very unique authorial voice, an auteur voice. I do think he's an auteur. And I wonder sometimes if I'm just jealous because he loves the same kind of movies that I love. And he's been able to turn it into a career. Obviously, he's achieved way more than I've achieved. But I got dreams, man. I got things I'm trying to accomplish. And the system is not there for me to do those things that it was. The system is not there to support me doing those things that it was to support him doing those things 30 years ago or however long it was. And I'm just like, man. So I do wonder, sometimes it's just jealousy. Like, I have a lot of respect for him. It's a long answer. Am I going to cut some of that in post? I might. Last question, Rick A. Do you have an all-time favorite movie? No. I don't. When people say they have a favorite movie, I don't believe them. I'm like, okay, you have a movie that you love. So I have a movie that I tell people is my favorite movie, which is Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. Because Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves in 1991 was the movie that pretty much created the movie fan that you see today. I had loved movies before that, obviously. Star Trek The Wrath of Khan and Batman 1989 and Dick Tracy. I was nuts about Dick Tracy with Warren Beatty and all those great character actors covered under all that makeup. The novelization by my friend, which is so weird to say, but it was so cool. My friend, Max Allen Collins. But Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves in 1991 was the first movie where I was like, oh wow, this is an interesting shot composition. Listen to that score and that musical cue. And look at the way that they framed, that they've lit this set. Like, that was the movie where I became aware of the craft of movies. Where it wasn't just watching the thing and being like, I like this. It was being aware of how it was made. And, you know, that was 91, 92, 93. We're getting, you know, some of the best movies. That's the birth of the new Hollywood. And then, so by the time I'm, you know, in my later teens and 20 or whatever, I mean, we're having all these crime films that are copying Tarantino. And they're not all copying. Like, I wouldn't say that The Usual Suspects is copying Tarantino. It's its own unique thing. So I think now in terms of lists, and like, I don't have favorites necessarily, but if you go like, well, okay, what's your favorite movie? I go, I don't know. And then you go, okay, well, talk to me about, you know, film noir. And I could be like, well, you know, I love Out of the Past really kickstarted a journey for me that then led me to The Lady from Shanghai, which I have such high praise for. And then, you know, Orson Welles, and then his flawed, you know, blah, blah, blah. And then you go, okay, well, tell me a little bit about some of the musicals that you connect with. And be like, well, first of all, Elvis. I freaking love Elvis. And I'm bothered that in the Baz Luhrmann movie for Elvis, they just breeze over his film career because there are some really great movies in there. And he almost was Brando, the second Brando in the 1950s. There, you watch some of those movies. You watch King Creole. Oh, man. You see what's happening? Like, I come alive when I talk about certain movies and certain things. I don't trust when people say they have a favorite movie because I don't see how you could possibly do that. But then again, people do. People say they have a favorite movie. Also, the other thing is that with the position that I'm in, it's like 100 movies a month, right? That are coming through my hands. And so I have this access. It's not unlike the access that Tarantino had in the video store. I have film history at my fingertips. And things are always rising and falling in my estimation based on all the new information that I'm putting into my brain. The more information you have, the harder it is for all this stuff to level out, you know? Like, if you go, okay, well, Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves is my favorite movie. How in the world can I say that when there's the Errol Flynn version of Robin Hood? Or when there's the, you know, in the 1950s, they tackled a bunch of Robin Hood stuff. And I like a lot of that 50s Robin Hood stuff. Technicolor, just swashbuckling adventure stories. How can I compare it to, you know, the more information you have, the harder it becomes to pin something down like that. These are the conversations that I love to have because I just like to geek out and we're all geeks about this stuff. I want to thank the members that sent in these questions. We will do this again very soon. Remember, if you want to become a Cereal at Midnight member, you can do it through YouTube. You can do it through Patreon. You get roughly one exclusive video every single week. They're a little bit more natural. They're a little bit less focused. They're often a little rawer. More raw. And you get more. You just get more. But more importantly, you're supporting Cereal at Midnight, because I don't really do a lot of ads. I don't do a lot of sponsorships. I prefer to keep the integrity of you knowing that I'm telling you the truth about everything. And that's a great way to support Cereal at Midnight, to support independent voices, and to support a channel that you love. Thank you guys. I appreciate you. Take care. Till next time, I will catch you later.